Hello and welcome back to another Cuz Bad Guys breakdown. In this breakdown we are going to go through the Flash and the Green Arrow expansion from Night Models for the Batman Miniatures game, and we are going to go through and do the Speed Force, how it affects the game, how you actually introduce it into the turn, and all of those different specifics. Well, let's go ahead and dive right in. First off, let's go over the Speedster rule. So any character with Speedster, this is going to be the Flash or Reverse Flash or Kid Flash, they're going to have this rule, and it's going to give them an up in speed and make it so they have an ability to use the Speed Force. So let's go ahead and just read it out. This character can use the Speed Force, see page 16, and have a maximum reserve of X Speed Force counters. Speedster characters have a basic movement distance of 15 centimeters. The character can also climb and ignore difficult ground without spending movement counters, and does not consider obstacles in difficult ground impaired movement. Other effects that modify the terrain or ground, example ice, must be taken into account. So let's go ahead and do a breakdown of what that actually means. So first of all, Speed Force powers, it means that you get to pull out counters from the speed pool. The Speedster character's basic distance to be able to move is 15 centimeters, so that means when you do your run, moving especially, you get to run 30 centimeters. This run is also not impaired, so you can run over terrain, you can run over objectives, all that stuff, without taking any penalties. So kind of acrobat, but without the being able to jump. And let's go ahead and go into the sequence of play. Inside the Flash and Green Arrow expansion book on page 16 is the beginning of the Speed Force. This is a picture of the sequence of play for Speedsters. So as you can see, it still has exactly the same things as a normal game, with take the lead, raise the plan, execute the plan, and victory points and casualty recount. What's added is the speed phase, which is in between the take the lead and raise the plan. All right, so I already know what you guys are thinking, because it's exactly what I thought when I first got this expansion. So you mean to tell me that we have to add another phase to the game that is Batman? So we have to put something before raise the plan that already takes time, and then executing the plan, which is playing the turn that already takes time. Isn't this going to super slow down the game? And the answer is no. As soon as you understand the rules, as soon as you get how the sequence of play actually works, we've played, me and my buddies, we've played games with 4 Speedsters, with the Flash, with Kid Flash, with Black Flash, and Reverse Flash, which are 4 characters that are out right now, and we've actually made a house rule that you can actually get points to the Black Flash. So we've played with 4 Speedsters, and the game was fine. I actually thought it was really thematic with how the Speed Force counters work, with how the Speed Force is actually a finite resource, because in the comic books it is. If too many people tap into it, it slows everybody else down, or the quickest guy gets to use the Speed Force instead of everybody else. I think it's a great way that Night Models has done this, and it's awesome. So at the beginning of the Speed Force phase, there are 10 Speed Force counters that are put into a pool, and depending on your Speedster level, that depends on how many of those counters you can actually take out. These counters represent the power of the Speed Force, and depending on your Speedster ability depends on how many tokens you can actually take out of the pool. Depending on who raised the plan first, their Speedsters they pick one of their Speedsters, and that Speedster gets to pull tokens out of the pool up to their Speedster number. And then it goes back and forth from your opponent until there are no Speedsters left. That is the way that Drain the Speed Force sub-phase works. So goes back to how I was talking about how Speed Force is a finite resource, and you actually have to think about which Speedster you want to be able to do stuff, and if your opponent also has a Speedster, how many tokens do you want to leave for them to also be able to use it. After the drain phase, there's the spend the speed force phase, which just like with whoever gets the initiative at the beginning of the turn, the person with the initiative chooses a speedster, spends speed tokens, speed force tokens to do a power, and then you alternate between you and your opponent selecting a speedster to do a power. It's important to note here that a speedster can only do one power unless they have special rules saying that they can do multiple. Alright, so let's go ahead and get right on into the speed power chart. Let's go ahead and start in the top left corner of the chart. That is speed power counter cost. So this is going to tell you how much the power costs. Next to that is going to be the power in the description. So any of the special rules that the power will actually give you during the turn or let you do immediately. And then on the right side is possible paradox. So a paradox is if you tap into too much speed force, it can be a bad thing and it can give you like feedback, like a ton of different things can happen. And I'm actually really glad that Night Models came up with this, because the speed force can be a very fickle thing to use. It's not something that you can just use all the time with no consequences and stuff. But depending on what you use, depends on how easy it is. So essentially a paradox is if it has a no next to it, you don't have to worry about it. If it has a number, then you've got to roll a single dice, and if you roll equal to or higher than that dice, than that number value, it means that a paradox happens. And if a paradox happens, you don't get to use your power, and you have to immediately roll on the paradox table, and that effect will immediately affect your speedster. And we'll go over that table after this one. The first power is muscle growth, and that is until the end of the round, the character gains +1 to its damage rolls and strength tests. So essentially you get +1 to hurt people when you punch them. It costs one counter, one speed force counter to be able to use, and has no paradox, which is good if you want to run up, punch somebody, and be quite a bit more effective in being able to damage them. The next is fast combo. For each attack counter spent in close combat this round, this character may strike twice, which is pretty good. So for somebody like the Flash, who has attack 3, all of a sudden his attack 3 turns into attack 6, which is pretty awesome. It means you double up on your attacks. It also costs one speed force counter, and it also has no paradox. So if you want to put a ton of attacks out on somebody, that is a good one to do. The next is super speed level 1. Move the character up to 10 centimeters following the normal rules for moving around the board. This costs one speed counter and has no paradox. So essentially this is you being able to move outside of your activation, which at the end of this video, I'll show you some tactics in being able to use speedsters and how to rack up points with them and really affect your opponents. So the next one is going to be super speed level 2. Move the character up to 20 centimeters following the normal rules for moving around the board. This costs 2 speed counters, so we're starting to move up in the world, and has a possible paradox of a 6+. So the first one that you can actually paradox on. The next is metabolize wounds. Recover 1 damage marker, any type, from the character. This costs 2 special counters and has no paradox. This is a great way to start healing your guys. So the Flash, Reverse Flash, any of those guys, they can start healing themselves, which this is great because any type means that you can start recovering blood. And when you can start recovering blood in this game, it makes it so characters are very survivable. Next is super speed level 3. Move the character up to 30 centimeters following the normal rules for moving around the board. This is moving up in the world again. It costs 3 speed counters, and then has a paradox of a 5+. So starting to tap into the speed force quite a bit, getting a little dangerous using stuff. The next ability is matter control. Until the end of the round, the character either gains the Kevlar vest or elusive trait, or may remove the poison effect. This costs 3 and has a paradox of a 6+. The next ability is molecular control. Until the end of the round, this character can pass through any scenery, element, solid object on the game board, but cannot end his move on another model or scenery element object. This costs 4 speed force counters and it has a paradox of a 5+. We'll cover this also at the end. This is a favorite of mine to use with the flash or reverse flash running through walls or cement barriers and stuff, things that people normally can't move through, is really great. The next one is going to be rapid disarm. Choose an enemy model in contact. The target cannot use ranged weapons with a firearm, mechanic, or beam special rule for the duration of this round. This one costs 5 speed counters and has a paradox of a 6+. This is the one power that I don't understand, because the Flash should be able to do this without being in base with somebody. He should be able to have this be like a bubble effect, so like 10 centimeters away from him, nobody can use firearms because he like snatches their guns away. But rules is written, it's pretty useless, and like if there's a shotgun guy or something that you want to stop them from being able to shoot, cool, but it's a huge waste of speed counters in my opinion. Then we get on to hyperspeed. Remove the speedster from play and immediately reposition it anywhere on the game board. The model's base must be able to fit in the new location. Here we've got 6 power cost, and then it has a possible paradox of a 4+. So super expensive in being able to spend counters, and the most dangerous paradox that we've got in the game so far. But on the off chance that you don't get a paradox, you get to go anywhere, which I've seen guys use this to, on a Batman crew, turn the bat signal on turn 1. I've seen them distract some people and then all of a sudden appear on the other side of the board. Hyperspeed is really good, but it's got a 50-50 shot of burning you. So I usually don't use it unless I'm like shooting for the fences. Next is hyper fast combo. For each attack counter spent in close combat this round, this character may strike 3 times. Has a power cost of 6 and has a possible paradox of a 5+. So I usually don't use this one as well because it has a really steep cost, and then it has a possible paradox when there's actually a better choice, which is the fast combo. And then if you're taking somebody like the Flash, who's a master, a Speed Force master, he can do 2 of these powers. So I would do fast combo and muscle growth, but more on that at the end of the video when I do tactics. And let's go ahead and go on to the paradox table. So the paradox table, whenever you suffer a paradox, you roll 2d6 and consult the chart. So there's quite a few different things that can happen if you hit a paradox. One of the worst ones is obviously a double 1. So if you roll a 2, switch timelines, remove the character from play as a casualty. So essentially, you blink yourself out of existence, which for a Flash speedster character happens pretty oftenly, actually. It's kind of funny. The next result would be a 3. What happened? Your opponent picks up the model and moves it anywhere on the gaming area. The model's base must be able to fit in the new location. The model cannot be forced to fall or spend any action counters during this move. So essentially this is just like the hyperspeed. but your opponent gets to choose where you go, which can be pretty bad depending on where he puts you. The next is going to be 4, Disoriented. The model cannot be activated this turn. So far, this is probably the worst one that I've ever rolled because all of a sudden they get to put you wherever you want, and I've had the Flash get set up right in front of Deathstroke, and then Deathstroke just killed the Flash. Because not being able to activate him means that he can't move. He doesn't get to spend any counters besides defending himself. It's the worst. And then number 5, Exhausted. The model cannot use movement counters for the remainder of the round. So outside of your 15 base movement, you don't get to move any farther than that, which for a speedster can be a pain. Luckily, the center paradox, which is going to be the 6, 7, 8, is pretty forgiving, which is Fatigue. The character is knocked down and receives 2 stun damage. So that's still a pain because if you don't have the initiative and you're knocked down, somebody can walk up to you and just start beating on you at defense 2. But for the most part, it's pretty forgiving. You can usually stand up and start recovering stun pretty easily. Then we go on to number 9, Surprise. The model suffers a -2 penalty to its defense until the end of the round. So this one, you can kind of recover from this one as well, because if your defense gets really low, you can usually just run around a building or run behind a blocking line of sight and just not worry about getting shot or being attacked and stuff. But if you are in the thick of it, you have to decide whether to take off and get out of there or not. And number 10, Too Fast. Your opponent picks up the model and moves it anywhere up to 30 centimeters away. The model's base must be able to fit in the new location. The model cannot be forced to fall or spend any action counters during this move. So again, just kind of like the what just happened, but it's limited to 30 centimeters, which you can recover from pretty easily as a speedster. Next is Yesterday again. Remove the character from play temporarily. At the end of the next take the lead phase, place the model back in play in base contact with any board edge. So essentially he runs back in time and then comes back onto the board. This is another paradox that you can usually recover from pretty easily unless you're trying to have him sit on an ammo and collect points. Then it can be pretty annoying. And then the last one is going to be Boxcar, so 12. Black Flash appears. An opponent places a model representing Black Flash in base contact with a board edge of their choice. Black Flash is under his/her control for the remainder of the game. If Black Flash is already in play, roll again on this table. He will only pursue one speedster at a time. So essentially, a bad guy, your opponent gets the Black Flash, which is a pretty ridiculously strong model, and he gets to just control him. There's no rule saying that the Black Flash has to go after the Flash and keep attacking him. He can actually go get on a different objective. He can go after some cop or some other henchman that you have on your team. This is one of the paradoxes that I don't understand very much, because the Black Flash would have come out and gone after whoever the speedster was. And I actually have some stuff to say about the Black Flash at the end of the video. All right, so now that we've gone over both the power table and the paradox table, let's go over some tactics to use with powers. So first, let's go over some of the super speeds. So this one, I like to deny shooters. So in the Speed Force turn, I'll actually move Speedster, so in this case the Flash, and I'll use Super Speed level 2. And I'll move him off of the objective in the speed phase, put him within 5 centimeters of the shooter, so in this case Deadshot. And that means during Deadshot's activation, he can't shoot normally, And then when I activate the flash, he'll run back to the objective or the point that I need him to be at, just using his regular movement. This tactic I call shooting denial. Also with a super speed, I'll do combat support. So using the exact same thing, we'll use super speed level 2. I'll move the flash off of the objective or the point that he's at. I'll run up into base with the person that I'm trying to fight with, another character. This automatically gives me a +1 to hit against them unless they have martial artist. And again, I haven't actually moved the flash. In his activation, I'll have him run back to the point like the objective or wherever he was going to be or that I need him to be. And this I call combat support. The last super speed tactic that I use, I call objective bouncing. So I'll take the flash that he's getting threatened by Deathstroke, and I'll jump from one objective to another. I need to make sure when I put down my objectives they're within 20 centimeters of each other. Then whoever I'm fighting will run after the flash with Deathstroke, and then in his activation, I run back to the other objective. Unless your opponent has multiple people to contain a speedster, this is actually very hard to counter. Next, let's go ahead and go over molecular control. So with molecular control, I'll combine it with the other 3 tactics, and I'll actually objective bounce using molecular control, and with a solid wall in between the 2 objectives, this makes it almost impossible for almost anybody to chase the flash down. I also use molecular control to shooter denial, and I also use it for combat support, it totally just depends on the situation and what I want to get done during the turn. So that's a few tactics that I use using the Speed Force. If you guys want more pointers, let me know. And I can do a really hardcore in-depth tactics for Speed Force. Those are some really basic ones that will really help out gameplay. I love using the flash. I love using the reverse flash. They're all great models. The Speed Force, it is a ton of fun in the game. And like I mentioned before, in our meta here, we've actually made a point value for the Black Flash, and we've given him hates Law Forces, Batman, and Green Arrow, so he can't be taken in any of the good guys. And fluff-wise, exception, because there are quite a few times in the storyline where the Black Flash will actually get some kind of sentience, and he'll have his own agenda that he wants to do. And the Black Flash is just way fun to play with instead of having to wait for that paradox. Because we got the model, might as well use them. So the reputation value that we use is 140 points. It's a little steep, but he's an absolute monster. I can do a tactical breakdown of him if you guys want. Let me know, give me some feedback. Let's go ahead and go into some characters that I would love to see as new speedsters. Alright, so we've already got the Flash, the Kid Flash, but I would love to see actual Wally West Flash from either the CW show or from the comics. It would be great. I would love to see the New 52 Reverse Flash. His paint scheme is awesome. His storyline is awesome. To see Jay Garrick would be great. The saucer helmet's so awesome. Godspeed would be a ton of fun. His paint scheme would be so much fun to do as well. The white and the gold and the yellow, just a lot of fun. And then the one that I would really, really love to see is Zoom. And specifically Zoom from the CW show, just because I would love to see a villain come out of the CW series, because we've already got the Green Arrow, we've already got Barry. I just really think Zoom would be a good character to do. And remember, 'cause bad guys.